Hi, we are today going to discuss the importance of internal control mechanisms and various components related to the internal controls. Internal controls, as the term itself says, controls. These are all designed and implemented by the board of directors in an organization. Why internal controls? This is a very important question to be asked. Every organization aims to achieve the core objective, which is nothing but the value maximization. The value maximization as an objective need to be achieved, and it can be achieved only if it is being supported by all the functions, sub-functions, and the individual responsible areas in the business operations. Every functional manager has various sub-functions under his control. Every sub-functional manager would be having various individual employees under their control. All these people are going to execute the respective areas, whatever they are supposed to handle. At the end of the day, how ably and efficiently these people are able to contribute would be resulting into the successful achievement of the corporate objective of value maximization. Why internal controls? Again, this question requires an in-depth analysis about what this achievement of the objective is. When we speak about the attainment of the corporate objective, we have understood that everybody must contribute towards the same. But the responsibility is always conferred only to the board of directors, the senior most management of the organization. They are responsible for it. But they have to ensure that somehow the corporate objective at the end of the day must be achieved. What is going to be a barrier for the organization to reach this specific objective? There is nothing but the risk factors. Risk factors would be hitting the business from various angles. Each function, each sub-function, each individual area definitely are going to get affected with these risk factors. These risk factors would prevent somebody from marching towards attainment of the respective objective. When these risk factors are dominating and it is going to create a high level of barrier, the organization would suffer. It is the responsibility, therefore, of the board of directors to ensure that these risk factors are brought down to the acceptable level. There is always a tolerance limit for any organization with respect to the risks. You cannot bring down or zero down the risk factors in the business. It can only be brought down to the minimum extent possible. You can just bring this down to the tolerable limit. When the board of directors are aiming to bring down the risk factors to the tolerable limit, how can they do this? That is where they are going to design and implement the internal control mechanisms. Internal control mechanisms are designed and implemented not at the outer peripherals. For each function, for each sub-function, for each area under a sub-function of the business, this internal control mechanism need to be implemented thoroughly. They aim to understand the entire risk which is affecting the business. They understand the types of the risk which are going to affect their business. What is the severity of these risk factors? To what extent these risk factors are going to create a damage to the financials of the organization? Understanding these elements critically would be helping the board of directors in perfectly qualitatively designing the internal control mechanisms, which would ultimately be acting as the tools to bring down these risk factors. Hence, the responsibility to introduce the internal control mechanism from the design stage further even rests with the board of directors. Now, when we speak about this responsibility, can the board of directors alone achieve this objective of ensuring that the internal control mechanisms are ultimately giving the desired objective? No. No doubt, all the functional managers, sub-functional managers, individual responsible officers of the organization who are all carrying out their respective responsibilities must respond positively towards these internal control mechanisms. They must conceive the ideas of the board of directors, understand, implement in the right perspective, and ensure that they are contributing towards the success of the enterprise. They are helping the board of directors to achieve the corporate objective. This is the core importance of internal control mechanisms in the organizations. Now, to discuss in depth how important internal control mechanisms are, we need to understand various components related to the internal control mechanisms. There are 5 components of control. Component number 1, creating an environment. Component number 2, risk identification, risk assessment, and risk analysis. Component number 3, implementation of controls. Component number 4, information and communication. Component number 5, monitoring and review. These components are referred as the gem of internal control mechanisms and the subsequent risk management of any business organization. What these components intend to communicate? Creating an environment. Understand, the board of directors are responsible to ensure that the objective, core objective is achieved. How can they achieve? Only if they are getting the proper support from the entire crew who are all employed in the organizations, it would be possible for them to do so. In order for the people to perform, a proper environment need to be created by the board of directors. Without having a proper environment, it is never ever possible for any employee to contribute towards the same. So creating the environment will be the responsibility of the board of directors again. In what way the environment are going to be created? Simply creating an environment in the business enterprise is alone not going to support the purpose. They must ensure there are qualitative people in and around. They must focus towards recruiting the most efficient people. They are committed to recruit the competent people in the system. This is also very well part of the business environment. When the directors are focusing towards creating the environment must be friendly enough for the employees to achieve this. Second, the employees must be qualitative. So the directors must ensure they are recruiting or aiming towards recruiting only the best people for their business. Next important point related to this creating environment is ensure what kind of an organizational style the directors are going to adopt. There are 4 important styles. One would be able to witness. 1, autocratic. 2nd, consultative. 3rd, democratic. 4th, laissez-faire. Among these 4 different styles, what is going to work perfectly for the business enterprise, which is aiming towards bringing all the people together and achieving the corporate objective? What type of the style is going to be most suitable? An analysis has to be done. The directors, therefore, it is their responsibility to see that the most appropriate style suited for their business must be adopted. A business enterprise or the directors cannot simply bring in a kind of an autocracy in the system. This would in fact demotivate the entire employees. They would feel that they are simply machines, not human beings. This feeling itself will be preventing them in contributing towards the operational efficiency. This would be hitting the organization in a manner whereby the directors themselves at the end of the day would struggle to achieve the corporate objective. So autocracy simply is not going to work. Consultative is equally dangerous. The board of directors pretend to be consulting with the employees with respect to each and every decision whatever they are going to take, but at the end of the day, their opinions will never be counted upon. The final decisions are going to be stressed only with respect to the view of the board of directors alone. They are never going to consider the viewpoints of the entire employees. But they would inform, keep them posted about it. They would communicate with them. But they will never show a courtesy to get the information properly from them and implement it. So they are neither fully autocratic nor fully democratic. They are somebody in between. Such kind of a style is what is said to be consultative style. It is equally dangerous for a business enterprise. Democratic style at the outset, no doubt, is definitely going to help the organization to grow. Because in this type of style, the board of directors ensures that all the people are brought together. A brainstorming sessions are conducted. The decisions are taken together. All the people are being given the equal opportunity to participate in the decision making process. This would be helping the directors to ensure that the business is marching towards attainment of the corporate goal. This is most suitable for many business. Laissez-faire at the fourth style. Understand, this is too lazy. The directors give all the kind of freedom to their subordinates. The subordinates can decide, subordinates communicates, and the manager obeys. Such a style again will not be working perfectly fine in the case of a business enterprise. So eliminating the style number 1, 2 and 4, we can confine that the most appropriate style would be democratic style. So this is again very important for creating a perfect environment. The board of directors creates a very good environment for the entire business, whereby they take all the people into their confidence. Because of this reason, people are able to conceive whatever communicated by the board of directors. They are being given freedom. Since they themselves are given an opportunity to take part in the organizational decision making process, the organizational objective by default is going to be achieved with ease. Next important point is how efficiently the organization structure has been designed by the directors. Structure plays a very vital role. Structure communicates how the communication channels are going to be in the business enterprise. Is it open or closed? Is the communication happening backwards or downwards? Both are important. Top to bottom and bottom to top communications are equally important in order to achieve the success. Next is the level of delegation of authority and responsibilities. Simply by giving the responsibility to the people, not contributing simultaneously or not delegating simultaneously, the authority is equally dangerous. You may not be able to expect a decent performance from the employees. This would be hampering the growth of the enterprise. An employee who has to perform perfectly and would like to contribute towards the operational efficiency should have a perfect blend of delegation of the responsibility as well as the authority. This is again the core part of creating the best environment by the board of directors. Last point regarding this creating environment is HR policies. Human resource department playing a very vital role in ensuring that there is a proper discipline and a high level of motivational environment which is created among the entire employee crew. Unless such kind of an environment is created, which is to be ensured by the HR, human resource function, it is very, very difficult for the board of directors to ensure that the entire employee crew performs according to the norms, according to the requirement of the management. Now, the first point of creating the environment, subsequent to this, let us step into the second component of control, risk identification, risk analysis, and risk assessment. Of course, these three steps are nothing but the part of risk management process prevailing in an organization, but still, this risk identification, analysis, and assessment is very well part of the components of the control. What is this risk identification? Risk identification involves what are the different types of risks which are affecting the business organization. When we look into the risk which are probably affecting the business enterprise, it can be segregated into three. 1. Internal risk factors. 2. External risk factors. 3. Inherent risk factors. Internal risk factors are nothing but the risk factors which are very well within the organization, always prevailing. It is the responsibility of the board of directors to see that such kind of internal risk factors are brought down to the minimum extent possible. The internal control mechanisms will be helping the directors to do so. The internal risk factors are controllable in nature. Internal risk factors include non-qualitative employees in the organization, lack of proper technology, non-compliance of the systems, rules, laws and regulations, lack of proper control mechanisms in the business. All these risk factors would be hampering the business processes and would be stopping the business in achieving the corporate objective. Board of directors can do a very, very great role in ensuring that these internal control mechanisms are very well controlled because they are all internal in nature. When we try to understand the external risk factors, these risk factors comes predominantly from the market side. The customers, the competitors, various suppliers of the key raw materials, everybody would be contributing towards these external risk factors. Customers' habits changes frequently. The company may not be able to predict, the organization may not be able to predict when the habits are going to change. What is the nature of the purchasing capacity of the people to whom the company is going to serve? They may not be able to assess whether the raw materials are perfectly available for them. They may not be able to perfectly assess whether the suppliers are competent enough to supply their material. These kind of elements can always fluctuate, and this is definitely going to affect the business operations. Understand, the external risk factors are never going to be controllable so far as the board of directors or the business is concerned. They may not be able to design and implement the internal control mechanisms to overcome these external risk factors. This can very well be defended or managed to a very great extent. That's how the organizations are surviving. Point number 3 is inherent risk. Inherent risk is something very, very important which is going to affect the internal operations of the business, but which are external in nature. What do you mean by this? We have been discussing about internal risk factors. We have discussed about the external risk factors. Now, when I say inherent risk factors, this is external in nature, but going to affect the internal business operations on a regular basis. Now, what is the difference this inherent risk has with this external risk factors? Is it one and same? No. External risk factors predominantly would be affecting the business strategically. Inherent risk factors, they are external in nature but are going to affect the business operation internally on a day-to-day basis. That's a major difference. In the case of these inherent risk factors, let me tell you an example. See, the company gives credit to various dealers or their customers. Say the credit policy of the company is 30 days or 35 days. This means that the salespeople or the collection team members would ensure that the money balances are collected from the respective customer on the 31st day when the credit policy is 30 days. So invariably, the sales executive or the collection department personalities, the executives would be getting in touch with the customers exactly on the 30th day to ensure that on the 31st day, this executive visits their office, collects the money, bring it and bank it. Company's operations are safe. Now, a customer who owes us $500 exactly on the due date, the sales executive who is responsible even for the collection gets in touch with the customer exactly on the due date. Customer tells him, please visit my office. I would ensure that the payment is being kept ready. The next day morning, by 10:30, 11, this sales executive visits the office of the customer to collect this money. Suddenly comes to know that he has flown to Middle East in connection with a death of a very important person in the family of this customer. What is happening over here? The sales executive is not able to collect the money on the due date. He has gone to the Middle East the previous day night. The telephone came to the customer the previous day night. He had to fly, no other go. What he can do at the end of the day? But the sales executive is in a fix. He has not collected his money. He is going to cut a sorry figure to his finance team members in the office. Because when he comes back, only then this payment can be collected. Now again it is going to be another 20 or 25 days more for him to come back. This is an example of an inherent risk. What is happening over here? Basically the customer was 100% prepared to hand over the check the next day. Executive was ready to collect this check. He would have collected this check in all sense, but unfortunately some mishap happened in the family and he had to fly. Due to this reason, the check was not kept ready in the office and he was not able to collect. But what is happening at the end of the day? Organization may not be able to do anything against the death of the family member of this customer. Can't even predict this. It's very, very difficult. So this is external in nature. You cannot do any internal control process or external control process preventing the customer from flying to a foreign country in connection with this incident. It is very difficult. Company may not be even able to predict. Now at the end of the day, what is going to happen? Because we were not able to collect this check, internally our operations got affected. The time delay would be taking us to wait for another 15 or 20 more days to get this payment back. Now we had initially offered only 30 days, understand. Such kind of a risk factor is referred as inherent risk factor. These risk factors are quite dominant, quite natural in many business houses. So when we speak about risk identification, risk, internal risk factors, external risk factors, inherent risk factors are to be critically considered. Now we are moving on to risk analysis. What is this risk analysis? The identified risk, how severe it is so far as the organization is concerned. The severity means whether the risk factors are high or medium or low. High risk factors are highly dangerous. That is going to no doubt affect the financial performance of the business. Medium risk factors equally, though not equally going to contribute like your high risk factors, but in a manner which will not be comfortable to the business is going to contribute towards a damage. No doubt in this. Low risk factors, the organization need not have to worry right now. So, it is the responsibility of the board of directors and the senior management to control these high risk factors as well as the medium type risk factors. For this reason, whatever identified risks are to be analyzed and segregated in a manner which would help the business and the management to control it comfortably. When we speak now about the risk assessment, just now we have understood that the risks are of three types: high, medium and low. High risk factors and medium risk factors no doubt are going to affect the financial performance of the business. To what extent the finances are going to get affected? To what extent the profitability would be affected because of these risk factors? This is what exactly the organization should assess. This is what is referred as risk assessment. Once we complete the process of risk identification, risk analysis and risk assessment, now comes the third component of control, which is called implementing the control. What kind of a control we are going to implement? There are 5 different types of control predominantly can be implemented in a business house by the management. Control number 1, preventive controls, detective controls, corrective controls, compensating controls, and 5th one, directive controls. Preventive controls, detective controls, corrective controls, compensating controls are permanent controls which are adopted by the business. Directive control, in contrary, is a temporary control adopted by the business only with respect to the situations. I'll explain. Preventive control. The best example is the annual maintenance contract which is undertaken for various machineries and equipments by the business organization is a kind of a preventive control. Appointment of security services in the warehouse, in the factory, in the office premise is a preventive control. When we speak about detective control, fixing cameras within the offices, within the vicinity of this warehouse, this is not going to prevent something from its happening. But what had exactly happened inside the office can be detected perfectly the next day, and some kind of a corrective actions can be taken. After detecting the deviations, whatever happened in the business, immediately the organization would be able to come out with certain corrective mechanism. Such kind of a control can be referred to be corrective controls. Compensating control is something which is regularly performed by the business. The best example would be bank reconciliations, vendor accounts reconciliations. What is happening in the case of a bank reconciliation? Company receives a lot of checks. Company issues a lot of checks. Whatever checks received by the company would be deposited into the bank. Company need to account for the same before depositing. When the company is issuing checks to various suppliers, various vendors, company has to account for the same. There are possibilities, in one or two cases, the company might miss to record these transactions in the books. But after 1 or 2 months, after a specific period of time, when we obtain the entire statements from the bankers, and when we are going to compare the banker's statement with our own bank account statement, we would be able to comfortably arrive at the difference and pick up the transactions what we had not accounted for. This would be helping us to correct the previous mistakes whatever done. Such kind of mechanisms adopted in the business are referred as compensatory controls. Now, as I have told you, the first 4 controls adopted by the business are permanent in nature. Once we have adopted, that is going to be there permanently for years. Now, when we come to this final one, that is the 5th one, directive controls. I have told you this is temporary control. Why this is referred as temporary control? The point to be noted here is, in order to manage a specific situation, the companies adopt certain control mechanisms. Once the situations, we have overcome these kind of situations, there is no requirement to continue with the same control mechanisms. We can drop the same. That's why, in order to manage the temporary scenarios or the situations, when the companies are coming out with certain control mechanisms, those control mechanisms are said to be temporary controls, otherwise referred as directive controls. So directive control is temporary in nature. Now, the 4th important component of control is information and communication. What is this information after all means? Board of directors have created the environment. Board of directors were committed to recruit only the competent people, we have understood. They have created a very good organization structure. They have adopted the best suited style for their business. They have ensured that a proper delegation with a perfect blend of responsibility and authority are being carried out in the business. They also ensure that the HR policies are superb. They are identifying the risk. They have analyzed the risk factors, assessed the risk factors, finally decided what is the best control component or the best control mechanism which would help the business to overcome these kind of risk factors, so that the organization can bring down the risk to the acceptable level, tolerable level. This important piece of information, in order to implement the same throughout the business, it need to be informed properly. Such kind of informations are to be communicated properly. That is the core aspect of this fourth component of control, information and communication. All the information, whatever thought to be communicated by the board of directors, necessarily need to be communicated to the entire crew of people. They may not be able to communicate to the lowest level in the organization, but through the functional heads and subsequently through the sub-functional heads, all such informations can be communicated to all the areas and all the individual responsible personalities. When these informations are passed on and the communications are perfect from the people who are supposed to ensure the organizational performance, no doubt the internal control mechanisms implementation would be at its best. The people would understand, they would be able to conceive, they will also communicate back with their feedbacks. These feedback mechanisms would be helping the board of directors to improvise this control mechanism and come out with the best among the best. This is very, very important and a continuous process which need to be adopted. This is where the point of information and communication is going to play a very, very important role or a vital role. The fifth important component of control is monitoring and control. Monitoring and reviewing, that's a better terminology to be used in this context. What is this monitoring? What is this review? Understand, whatever said and done, the board of directors are putting a great efforts. They are understanding the risk factors. They are analyzing the risk. They have assessed the risk factors. They are ensuring that the entire environment is so beautiful and conducive for everybody to perform. They are coming out with internal control mechanism. They ensure that they are designing the best internal control processes for their business. After all, when they implement such kind of an internal control mechanism, probably the people also would have understood at the first instance, because the information have been passed on. Communications are very, very crystal clear. In all these situations, please understand that the board of directors should never fail subsequent to the implementation of the internal control process. Why this failure happens? If monitoring is missing, a proper review mechanisms are missing, probably this venture itself would be resulting into a failure mode. Why? What is the basic purpose behind doing all these activities by the board of directors? No doubt, attainment of the corporate objective of value maximization. So, with the same, when the board of directors are marching towards, it is their most important responsibility is to monitor, review consistently. It is their responsibility too. What is the effect of this monitoring and review mechanism? Understand? The people who have initially conceived the internal control mechanism sometimes might skip something from their brain, and at the end of the day, when they perform certain activities, something might get deviated in reality. This need to be monitored. When these deviations are increasingly going up in the business enterprise, that would hamper the business performances. The business may not be able to reach attaining the corporate objective. So the director's responsibility is to ensure that a proper monitoring mechanism, a review mechanism is adopted, designed and implemented. If the board of directors are not independently able to carry this out due to the complexity of the business organization, complexity of the internal control mechanisms, complexity of the activity universe, board of directors can always seek the help of experts. Internal auditors at the end of the day would be helping the board of directors to ensure that this monitoring and review are properly done to support the board of directors and help them to achieve the core objective. Thanks.